The indigenous peoples of the United States come from a rich tradition of faith and resistance. In our discussions of racial justice, we must elevate the voices and cultures of the original owners of the land that we occupy. On this episode of Race Talk Revolution, Associate Minister, therapeutic psychologist, and adopted family member of the Lakota-Sioux Rosebud Nation, Dr. Patty Luckenbach, and spiritual leader of the Lakota Way Healing Center in Colorado and co-founder of Spirit Horse Nation, Mr. Doug Goodfeather, discuss with us the importance of thinking indigenous for creating community-based and community-led solutions that strengthen the cornerstones for a good quality of life. This episode originally aired December 8th, 2021.
So again, good day, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, knowing that this is a bi-coastal audience and everyone in between. Welcome to another episode of Race Talk Revolution with Lane in your gene. As you know, Race Talk Revolution is a platform where your voice matters. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. And if you're new to the show, welcome, and we invite you to come back and tell a friend. So today we have two speakers today. Dr. Patty Luckenbach is a minister with Centers for Spiritual Living at Mile High Church in Lakewood, Colorado. She's an author and transpersonal psychologist specializing in grief recovery. And then we have Mr. Doug Goodfeather, who is a spiritual leader, healer, and environmental activist, and the author of the book, Thinking Indigenous: Native American Spirituality for a Modern World. They will tell us how we can integrate indigenous thinking into modern life for a more interconnected and spiritual relationship with our fellow beings. So as you know, as always, during our conversation today, we ask that you please remain muted. And when we get to the Q&A section of the program, we will instruct you how to raise your hand. Again, we want to remind you that with Race Talk Revolution, Race Talk Revolution is a loving, inclusive platform designed to strip away the false beliefs that keep us separated as human beings, uncover the not so hidden truth that we all want the same things in life, and to heal the wounds created by systemic racism. Race Talk Revolution is a safe and brave space for people of all backgrounds to share ideas and opinions and explore the nuances of systemic racism while together growing our capacity for effective anti-racist activism. The Race Talk Revolution community is committed to practicing radical, inclusive love. So what that really means is, when we do not understand or agree with what's being shared, we are committed to listening with respect, appreciation, and empathy. You see, it is our commitment here at Race Talk Revolution that every person be encouraged, heard, and appreciated, because here on Race Talk Revolution with Lane and Eugene, every voice matters. And here is my co-host, Reverend Lane Cobb.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So before I introduce our guest, I'm going to suggest, Dr. Luckenbach, that you might call Doug and let him know that he can call in by the telephone. That might work because he seems to be having some connections issues. So rather than proceed without him while I'm reading, why don't we ask him if he'll call in?
Yes, I'll work with that.
Awesome. So, folks, often in the United States, our conversations about racism and the effects of racialization actually center on Black and white issues, right? Between people of African descent and white people. And so what is true is that really we need to, when we're talking about race issues, we need to make sure that the voices of our Indigenous brothers and sisters are also elevated. Much of the great activism in the world actually comes from the Indigenous communities. And of course, as we know, that community has been decimated by white supremacy. and colonization. So we are very pleased today to have with us Dr. Patty Luckenbach and Mr. Doug Goodfeather, and I'm going to go ahead and read their bios right now. So Patty Luckenbach is a well-known speaker, author, and associate minister of Mile High Church in Lakewood, Colorado, where she serves as director of the Prayer and Care Center. A Colorado native, Dr. Patty received her master's degree in transpersonal psychology from Boulder Graduate School, and she holds an honorary doctorate of divinity from the Centers of Spiritual Living. She is a teacher and psychotherapist specializing in grief support services, psycho-spiritual growth, and journal writing as a therapeutic adjunct. Her greatest joy comes from facilitating others in stepping through the portals of life's changes. An adopted member of the Lakota-Sioux Rosebud Nation, her work with the tribal nations includes serving as a member of the Board of Trustees for the Lakota Healing Way Center, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to helping people with trauma, addictions, homelessness, illness, and PTSD rebalance themselves through Indigenous Native American spirituality. And I'm going to just take a minute and mute Dr. Patty.
Which I just did.
Okay, great. Thank you. And it occurs for me, Eugene, that he may not have a call-in number. You might have to send him one. All right. So we'll manage that in a moment. Doug Goodfeather is a spiritual leader, environmental freedom fighter, and full-blooded Native American Lakota. Born and raised in the traditional indigenous ways of his elders on the Standing Rock Indian Reservation in South Dakota. He is a direct descendant of Grandpa Chief Sitting Bull. He is the executive director and spiritual leader of the Lakota Way in Colorado and the co-founder of Spirit Horse Nation, an organization that brings the ideas of conscious living, mindful consumption, and collective impact to the forefront of human consciousness. Mr. Goodfeather is the co-founder of Spirit Horse Nation, an organization that brings the ideas of conscious living, mindful consumption, and collective impact to the forefront of human consciousness. His latest book, Think Indigenous, Native American Spirituality for a Modern World, is described as a guide to integrating Indigenous thinking into modern life for a more interconnected and spiritual relationship with our fellow beings, Mother Earth, and the natural ways of the universe. So I know Dr. Patty is with us. Welcome to you, Dr. Patty. Do we need to send Mr. Goodfeather a way to get in? And you are now still muted, so you have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yes, we do need to send a phone number for him to get in.
Okay, so I'll go take care of that. We're happy to have you here, and I'm gonna turn it over to Eugene. Thank you. Let's see if we can get Doug in.
All righty. Again, Dr. Patty, it is so very good to see you. Dr. Patty and I have known each other for a little while now. Dr. Patty, you are a minister, over at Mile High Church of Religious Science and a psychologist specializing in grief recovery. Let me ask you, what led you to study the Lakota culture, and how has your partnership with the Lakota Nation influenced how you approach the conversation with your patients?
Well, for many years, close to 30 years, I've been connected with the Lakota-Sioux world. And it was just a gift that I made that connection. I didn't really try, it just worked out. And it was something that I'd always held within my heart. And I just want to mention right now, my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, had relationships not only with the Indians when I was a young girl, but also with our blessed Black friends and Hispanic friends. So I grew up going to powwows with my grandpa. And so I just had such a need to be back into that arena, so to speak. And I was invited to a Sundance many, many years ago. And everything has unfolded since then. And I have been adopted by two Lakota families, and in their terminology, that's called hunka, where they choose their relation. So they chose me. And so I have, I'm a grandma, I'm an aunt, I have grandkids in the Lakota world and love them all. So it has helped me to be able to be present with them when I say be present, I didn't push myself into that community. I feel I was just accepted, and I think that's a good thing for any community to build relationships, is to show up just with heart. And from there, things have unfolded. So it has assisted me in gathering greater understanding of the human need, and so much grief work in the Lakota Nation, and been able to set up a couple, teaching them, not that I go there, not as a white woman, I'm showing up to do all their grief for them and help them, but to train them. So it's been a great journey, and it continues.
Yeah. Thank you. You know, there's, I have a few questions for Doug, but I have to wait. And I don't know if you can answer this question because this is something that I was looking at his book, Thinking Indigenous. I want to point out to our listeners and our viewers here is a book that Doug Goodfeather wrote. And I mean, just the title, Thinking Indigenous, is something that causes me to really wonder, so what does that mean to think indigenous, right? And so in Doug's book, he writes, you know, what if we called upon the knowledge of our roots to move us forward individually and collectively as a society? So I want to ask you, Dr. Patty, what do, how can I rephrase this? What do you think that means? What do we do when a person thinks or believes that their roots stem from systemic racism?
Well,
great question, huh?
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, this book is wonderful because, yes, it was written by a very strong Native American who's well respected and does work with all people. But so it has that component, and Doug can speak about that, of Native American belief, but he has expanded that and asked us to find our own rootedness. And I hear what you're saying, Eugene, about if we're just holding to, and I certainly have been gathering how people hold to that systemic belief that if I go to my roots aren't good roots. Maybe someone else is not accepting my roots. And I believe that what Doug has inscribed in this book helps us all to move beyond that systemic racism. And the word systemic, can't pronounce it, but I know what it means. It's like we need to get beyond the systems. And I don't know if I have the answer how to get beyond the systems. Because once we can get beyond the systems, we can honor the incredible creativity and the connectedness of our roots, no matter what color our skin is.
Yeah.
But I think the situation is getting beyond the systems. A lot of times we just hold to those systems.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and that's what it takes, right? Getting beyond. And that's what we talk about here on Race Talk Revolution is getting beyond the systems. And I love what you say, you know, to get back to our roots, you know, it is because it's interesting, right? That none of us were born in a religion, right? None of us were born we were all born, this is what I like to say, that we were all born as what I call spiritual beings. Now, whatever your belief, what anybody on the show here, whatever the belief is, right? But we were born from this divine something, right? And then that, I believe, is what I would call our roots, and wanting to get back. I think there's a need, especially these days, there's a need for us to get back to that. It's interesting to watch what's going on these days with everything that's happening, right?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at that as there's this need for everybody to get beyond, as you say, right? Getting beyond the system of whatever it is that keeps us seemingly separated. Right. So, Dr. Patty, let me ask you, what are some of the ways or a way that that people can can get past or to let go. I need to write this question down. To let go of what seems to hold them back.
Well, I would perceive, and I sense that ways that we can get together is just that, is to get together. And that's not as easy as it sounds, but I think dialogues, I think this show that you have produced, Eugene and Lane, is a wonderful way for people to just come in and hear different views and to be able to talk. I just want to mention that I heard you say that we came in spiritually, and I believe that with my whole heart. And that's why I'm a minister at the Centers of Spiritual Living, because it's more eclectic. And I'm not here to promote that church, but I am here to speak about my beliefs about being open and more eclectic, to be able to build relationships. And that's one thing I learned in the Lakota world, in the Native world, is to build relationships. And I think that's where the big question is. How do I build relationship with my Hispanic friends? How do I build relationships with my Black friends? And I think it's just coming together in dialogue. And it's sometimes we have to just set down the walls. And even as a spiritual minister, there's a lot of walls around even spirituality, you know, the way you believe, let alone around religion. And to be able to come together in dialogue or to create education so we can learn more about what those roots are, help someone else discover their roots as we're discovering ours, I think could be helpful.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Goodfeather, are you here? Because there are now 2 Dr. Patty Luckenbachs in this broadcast.
Whoa.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Yay.
There you are.
We are frantically looking for a phone number. I apologize that I could not find one. I am so happy that your system allowed you to get in. So I will now change your name.
I'm doing that now, Lane.
Welcome to Race Talk Revolution.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I know that Eugene asked some really, really great questions, and Dr. Patty has been talking about, healing through Native spiritual traditions. Tell us a little bit about what you do, please, Mr. Goodfeather, if you would.
What I do, my work is consists of I work with PTSD veterans and civilians. I work with suicide prevention, addictions, and homelessness, and that's where. And I do environmental work as well on another platform, but basically that's what I do. And I use our traditional philosophies and our stories and our experiences from our history, and and I help people come through what they're struggling with in life. And so that's basically what I do. A therapist, counselor, however you want to call it. It's kind of like my work, spiritual work as well. And I use scientific and spirituality, and because I work with a lot of people who are just logical, and so I got to bring in the scientific and the facts and the proofs, but I also bring in facts and proof with the spirituality to give them the perspective of how powerful that is and intelligent it is.
Indeed. Thank you. Well, I know you now have 2 organizations, and you have authored at least 1 book. Where I'm interested, one of the organizations that you have formed is called Spirit Horse Nation, and it's
Yes.
described as a global community that promotes conscious living, mindful consumption toward making a collective impact in the environment. And your website mentions elevating Mother Earth consciousness. And so I'd love to hear, what does that mean, Mother Earth consciousness, and how can elevated consciousness impact racial justice?
Well, right now the environmental fights over pipelines going through water, going through government land, reservations, through, poor communities. And we see all, and then when people step up to protest this or to protect these causes, the first thing we call in is the SWAT team and the National Guards, everything, that involves war and these kind of things. And so it creates conflict, and it creates division. And but a lot of times these people or these organizations, these corporations have think tanks where they think up things to create animosities against each other. As you know, the conspiracy theories, all these things that are going on, it creates division, it creates animosities, and there's no facts-based proofs on all these things that happen. And the people that are affected are the poverty level, people of color, reservations, and it's there's a tactic. It's deliberate, it's thought up. These things are thought up in these ways, and they go after that. And so when people resist and rise up, the government or the city or come in and allow these things to happen, and it's okay to do that because they're protesting, so it's okay to do things like that. We got to protect our homes, our environment too. And so they turn us against each other, which has always been a tactic of the government, and to create divisions amongst people. And but the solution is all of us coming together intelligently. And one of the things that my experiences is working with different divisions, different ethnicities, even my own people. There is always a struggle for leadership, and everybody wants to be the chief, but nobody wants to be the warriors. So we have to have an intellectual and intelligent gathering and conversations about these things, and elect leaders that know what they're doing, and have the people that that are helping to research and redefine, and to get into government, to elect our people into these things. So this is an intelligent way to do it now, and because instead of fighting on the street, we need to go into the heart of what's going on, and that's where we're going to be more effective. And so we need to be more intelligent about these things, and so we can stop these things that are happening, and create healing amongst the people instead of division. And so that's what I see in my experience in working in these kind of things. And growing up on the reservation has been, it was a beautiful experience, but there was a lot of division and a lot of racism, and going to high school off the reservation was really hard. I really didn't like school because of that, and I was fighting for your rights, and seeing your people abused and attacked, it's hard to do that. But people don't, the ignorance from that is it makes it corrupt. And one of the two things I always say is the two dangerous things that come together is ignorance and arrogance, and so these things escalate, and there's a tactic behind it. People think about these things, and they get it out to their people. Then and it seems like you see the racism, and they're more together, and I'm like, but we're trying to create a unity, but at the same time we're always breaking apart for some reason, and we're arguing against each other. And that's what I see is the struggle for leadership. And we need to talk more intelligent about this, and really elect good leaders to really who care about the people, who care about all people, who care about all life, things that we need for our future and for our children, because we can't just think of right here and now, but we got to remember, like our ancestors, they knew we were coming. They knew that there was people in the future waiting for them to help, and that's why they made these sacrifices, as hard as it was back then. And so we're blessed with those sacrifices today, so we need to keep moving and think about our children in the future, our grandchildren, so on and so forth, and do this intelligently, because if we don't, we lose the fight.
Doug, that brings up a great question in your book. There's a statement that you make. It's, with each generation, we have drifted further and further away from our ability to recognize and connect with the source of our original design. My question is, how does this affect the way we as human beings treat each other?
Well, as human beings, we're put into a construct and ripped away from our traditional cultures, our languages, the way we think. We think indigenous. We used to think indigenous. We used to all be that way because we're all indigenous to this earth. But when a construct comes in and takes that all away from us, it teaches us how to compete against each other, compete against your neighbors, so on and so forth. And our original design is the way nature is. We're nature, and we need to be a part of nature. And as we know, the more things that we destruct, the more it affects us. It affects part of our body, whether it's our lungs, our brain, our kidneys, whatever it is. We're destructing something that's a medicine for the body, for the natural body, because we're created that way. We're created to the bond of this Mother Earth. And when a construct comes in and synthesizes us thinking and eternally, we end up getting sick instead. You see all this cancers, all the division, or all these things that are happening, and that's the original design, is that my people, the elders say this word is called mitakuye oyasi, and it's in the book, and it means all my relations. And they said this for thousands of years. And how did they think like this? How did they believe like this? We've seen each other as a nation. Yeah, we could be different, but we know that we need to live off this Mother Earth together. We all hunt together, we eat plants and all of this thing, drink water. We're created that way, and we use each other's organs nowadays, and things like that. So we're created to help each other, to be useful to this earth, and to use our experiences to create healing, and to create, instead of using some of those experiences that are trauma. What I teach is, using the trauma as a teacher instead of a wound or a cane, or, using it as an excuse. You take those teachings and traumas and you use them as teachings. Those are your professors, your philosophy, because you've been through something that you experienced, and you've gained wisdom and knowledge from that. So, that's the things that I realized, that we need to come back together in that way, think alike that way, help each other.
Yeah, thank you for that. I wanted to go back to this question, and Arnold chatted to me about this as well. Think indigenous. So what do you, because I don't want to assume that I know what that means, right? So when you say think indigenous, to live indigenously, what can you give us a deeper meaning of what that is for you?
Well, I think indigenous is, it's a natural reaction that we have to nature. It's supposed to be, and it's supposed to be a natural reaction to each other as humanity, as humans. And and thinking indigenous helps you to understand the spiritual aspect of your life and the relationship between you and Mother Earth. And like you say, you get up in the mornings and you witness a beautiful sunrise, and it gives you an emotional reaction. Now that's there
we go.
So when you feel that emotional reaction, whether it's love or peace, and you think, and then all of a sudden you start thinking of your relatives or friends, you're thinking indigenous. You start to think outside the box, but at the same time, you pray and you hope that millions others are feeling the same reaction you are. And so we become a conscious race. We feel that Mother Earth. That's the power of it. So we have to see that and think like that, and how to understand that. Nowadays, you know, we got to get up early, and we get upset, we get angry, we got to go to work or got to go to school, whatever it is. It's not happy. It's not natural, because we're forced to do that. And then at the same time, we're still living under the poverty level, even though we have 2 or 3 jobs, and at the same time we have a family. So it's breaking down our natural abilities, even our immune systems. You know, it does all of this stuff that happens to us. So thinking in Indigenous is to understand the purpose of your life, to understand that each culture has a purpose, every race has a purpose. And you understand that when you see the different natures in life, you see all over the world different ethnicities, cultures, and you see the way they're dressed, whether they live in a desert, in Alaska, in a jungle, in the mountains, on the plains. You see something in that culture. And you see the way Mother Earth has dressed them. They have their own dress. They dress for that in that environment. And then they have rituals from that environment. So this is how Mother Earth is teaching us. She's teaching us how to dress. She's teaching us our rituals. She's teaching us our language and how to feed off that land and how to grow and how to cultivate, how to survive on that land or to live on that land. And so this is how you think Indigenous in that way, if that makes sense. But you can see all over the world in different aspects of the world, there's certain people in different regions that dress that region because of the environment. That's how Mother Earth dresses us. She teaches us how to dress. She dresses us. She gives us rituals and food and sustenance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Dr. Patty, is there anything that you would like to add?
Well, I just want to just add acknowledgement to Doug Goodfeather. He is the real deal when it comes to living a life so connected to other people and to the land. And I agree totally that, you know, the ignorance and the arrogance of individuals, it's like being imprisoned when that's being experienced collectively, individually. And for us to be able to come to that place of interconnectedness, as Doug said, that interconnectedness is so important. And, you know, whether it's dialogues with other people, that's just a beginning. But it's going to take place through the heart of the people. It's not going to take place through the systems. As Doug so beautifully described, the systems, excuse me, the systems are sometimes, or most of the time, steel gates. So the warmth of the human heart, the connectedness to Grandmother Earth, her heart, to the universe and universes, is what is needed to be able to move through those iron chains and gates, to be able to get to know each other, to live together peacefully on this earth.
You know, Dr. Patty,
Yes.
one of the things that scholars are saying about our country is that we are going through a grieving process, right? We're right, and all of the things that Mr. Goodfeather was saying, you know, bring about grieving, the loss of a connection with the earth, the loss of connection with each other, the loss of connection of our own ability to take care of ourselves and to follow our intuition and to make a good living, and all, you know, all of those things, right? And also for many of our citizens here, grieving the death of the status quo, right? The racial stratification also, right, is creating this big grief, you know, as denial is a stage of grief, and bargaining is a stage of grief, and anger is a stage of grief. So you see all this. My question is, how can Indigenous spirituality help us navigate that grieving process? And how might it help us to stay hopeful and energized in our stand for, as you say, dismantling the systems that are clear, like you said, opening the steel gates?
Right, the steel gates. Well, first of all, a definition of grief is emotional pain. And so we have been collectively experiencing a lot of emotional pain, and people are reacting differently. We need to get to a place of responsiveness And I believe coming together and just identifying, first of all, I got to identify the pain, and then we're experiencing the pain. And then we get to a place where we begin to adjust and make different choices, build a different relationship with systems. And so it is a collective grief that's taking place. I know in the last 2 years, I have never been so busy on an individual level with people in grief, and then sensing this whole collective piece, because things are changing and they're not going back the way they were. This is just what I feel, I'm expressing. And there are new beginnings. So I remember many years ago, one of my Native American teachers and leaders, Howard Badhand, who Doug knows, he said to me one day, he said, "You are going to see everything that was corrupt fall." And I often think about that. And when things fall, yeah, there's pain, definitely. Incredible change is always taking place, but big change is taking place. So we're coming into a place where it's going to demand us to come together, to reach out a hand to help another person, you know, to, if someone's down, to bring them up and to learn from each other. And so it seems like a hard time. It is a hard time, but I know the human spirit knows how to move through this time.
Yeah. Yeah, the human spirit knows. We
Yes,
need to
it knows.
learn to tune in, right? That's part of what this is about, right?
It's about tuning in and tuning up.
Yeah, very, I
Yeah,
love
for
this.
sure.
Mr. Goodfeather, can I just ask, one of the resources I sent to our audience was a 2016 article about you in Rolling Stone magazine, talking about your effort to help activists find their inner warrior. We're all about inspiring activism on this platform. How can we connect with our inner warrior, and what does that look like?
And you're on mute, Doug, because I want to hear this.
Okay. Sorry about that. Well, you know, we all have the flight and fight mode when it comes down to it. And, you know, it comes from myself is to understand, you know, how our Mother Earth is and how she takes care of us. But one of the things that we're taught in the construct is we're taught a lot of things are taken away from us. Our natural abilities, our given rights that when we're born with, we have given rights. And that's our tears, you know, our breath, our smell, our hearing, the food, our dreams, you know, free will. And we have given rights. And those are a lot of times in the construct are taken away from us. So those things we become dependent. And when we become dependent, we're depending on something else. We're reaching out for something else. And in the spiritual aspect, you know, the creator is a part of us. So we have to create you know, something that is good for us and to create a life that is effective and useful in this world. One of my grandmas used to say is, it takes a warrior to cry. And it takes courage to do that in front of people or at the time that it's needed. And because this warrior, when he cries, he has been taught the love of his people. He's been taught the love of himself. And so when he's crying for something or somebody, even the environment, you know, he's crying because there's the reaction of that warriorism coming up. And I always tell people, you know, you need to be a peaceful person. You need to walk as a peaceful person in life. But there's a time that's going to come where you have to be a warrior too. And you have to be a warrior for things that need to teach us to defend, like, you know, the innocence, you know, our environment, our water. You know, we're going against things that are, you know, that have effective financial effectiveness on our battles. And a lot of times we're coming in with just who we are because we care about what's going on. We feel and see what's going on. And if you drive around, you see all these things like the mountains, you drive into the mountains, you see a lot of trees that are cut down. You can feel the effectiveness there. You can literally feel it. You can go to some of these creeks and rivers and see all the pollution floating down. And you can feel the emotion it affects you. So it stirs up something inside of you to create reaction. And that's the intelligence of our emotions. And we're taught to hide from our emotions. We're taught to stuff it down and put a synthetic pill on top of it and hold it down. But in our culture, in our spiritual ways, you unplug that and let the emotions flood through, because those are natural reactions, something that you need to be intelligent of. You need to be aware of your emotions and learn the intelligence that comes out of these emotions. And these emotions give us a reaction to do something and not just sit around. And you'll feel that. I can't just sit here. When Standing Rock happened, I was driving there and there was people walking on hitchhiking. And so I picked them up and I said, "Where are you guys going?" I said, "We're going to Standing Rock. We're going to and be a protector." And they said, "We were sitting around watching it on the news and all that. And I just couldn't sit down. I couldn't sit still. I had to get up and do something. I had to be a part of it because, my children are young and I want them to have a future with clean water, with a clean environment." So it stirs something up in you. You create that emotion. The environment is doing that to us. And that's how connected we are with the water, with the air, with the animals. It creates emotion and it creates us to do something about it. And that's how connected we are. And that creates that warrior to come out and defend. And then you become one of God's warriors. You become a warrior for Mother Earth. And you do what you need to do. And you start to, bring the process of healing or intelligence and into these kind of fights. And, and people see you doing it, you're going to inspire others. And, you create an army and you create a movement of conscious thinkers.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And Eugene?
Yes, Dr. Patty.
I'd like to just bounce from what Doug just said. When the situation about the water was at its height, a spiritual warrior, they didn't march with guns to fight. I happen to know that Doug and several other great leaders organized veterans that came. People came from all over the world. So this is about, the indigenous to Grandmother Earth and to human rights. They came from all over the world. And in the gymnasiums of schools up there, they organized prayer. They came together in prayer before they stepped forward to stand, not with guns, but to stand with their intention. So I just wanted to mention that because that's definitely being a spiritual warrior.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Patty. I mean, there's so much here, and there are a couple of comments about that one line. It takes a warrior to cry. It takes courage to do that. Cody asked a question I want to read here. It says, many Black folk I know, because of their history of nature as enemy in this country, are less connected to Mother Earth than some of us privileged ones who were taught her wonders from childhood. How can that be remedied? I don't know if either you, Patty, or Doug have answers for that. I know for me, it's important for me as a Black man and somebody who is really connected to the earth. It's important for me to get outside, just to get outside and allow the sunrise to just awe me, So that's, and Cody, I understand the question, but I am going to throw out that question. How can that be remedied? Doug, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. My companion, Carol Plain, she coined this phrase called traditional reassurance. And traditional reassurance is going back to your roots, going back to who you are as a indigenous person, or, you know, finding your way back to your culture and understanding those meanings and those rituals that your people lived with, and finding the intelligence from that culture and that philosophy that came, and introducing it to the people in classrooms. And a lot of times that I realize it's in ceremonies and spiritual gatherings that children listen and people listen, because there's a respect sense there of prayer and spirituality. So one of the things that I learned about traditional reassurance is that it gives the person the confidence of who they are, gives them their identity. Even if people from other cultures adopt your culture, it gives them the purpose of who they are as an individual, gives them confidence and identity. And then from there, they can find, it'll naturally teach them the pull of who they are, and they'll find that traditional, whether they research it back to their country or their origins or whatever it is, and study those origins, or, you know, the traditional reassurance we have in our upbringings, our values, our virtues. Our grandmas and grandpas taught us to be strong through things and to, you know, persevere the things that they persevered through. And, you know, we came through a very trying history, and it wasn't very nice. It was very pretty brutal for a lot of my people and a lot of other races. But instead of blaming and shaming, we can understand each other by educating each other's culture and adopting those cultures and how it sees to affect our lives, how it affects people's lives. So when I bring people through a rite of passage through what I teach, I bring them through a rite of passage, whatever nationality they are. It gives them the human, it gives them the human and the spiritual values and virtues that is natural to all of us. There's no color involved in it. It's just the natural human virtues and values. And when we adopt those natural virtues and values into our lives, it becomes a traditional reassurance. We start to live by those values and virtues of life and nature. And it gives us balance, and then, you know, there's no color in it, because what I was taught growing up is, you know, in spirituality, there's no color. Wherever you sit, it's all light. We're all light for a reason. And, you know, if you want to go into the scientific aspect, you can too, but these are the philosophies I've learned. And one of the things that I've learned about that is for instance, for example, the buffalo people have brought many people through, because they were abundant back in the day, but their philosophy and their teachings still live with us today. We still use those values and virtues that the buffalo taught us, because the buffalo is built for a reason, and it goes into the storm. So I use the metaphor of the buffalo and taking people into the storm from depression, from things like that they go through. You got to go into the storm, and in order to come out, because if you run, you're going to constantly be running from the storm. So these are teachings, traditional reassurance teachings that I teach, that anybody can adopt into their life and give balance.
Looks like you froze up there. Uh-oh. Maybe this is on my end, because everybody seems frozen.
Yeah, that's you, but we can hear you though.
Okay.
Let's go into the Q&A. Is it time?
Yep, it is. How interesting.
I see Robert has a question.
Okay, looks like I'm back.
Robert, let us remind people how to raise their hands first, and ask everybody if you would please keep your questions and comments to under a minute, so that we can make sure that we get everybody's questions answered. Folks, if you want to know how to raise your hand, you can go down to the reactions button on the bottom of your screen and hit that. There will be a little icon that says raise hand, or you can find your name in the participants section and raise your hand that way.
And there have been lots of comments and questions in the chat. So I know guys and gals, you have questions. So please go ahead and raise your hands and ask. Robert, thank you for being first this time around, and you're on mute.
Unmute myself. Okay. Thank you. Is it correct to call you Mr. Goodfeather? Or what's the proper way of addressing you? That's the first thing. I'm sorry, can't hear you.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I want to really appreciate the work that you and Dr. Luckenbach have also done. What I want to ask is in terms of people who are doing activist work, my experience is that they often there's often burnout, there's often a great deal of pain, which both motivates, but it also is draining, and that they experience. And so I'm wondering, listening to you talk, I was reminded of the peace and healing that I heard just in you talking, and some of it was certainly ideas, but also an energy, a feeling, the way in which spirituality, or what I'll call the way the spirit seems to shine through you and with you. I, just listening, found it very healing. And so I wondered, since hearing was part of it, the experience for me, very important, have you done tapes, or other healers done tapes, so that people, especially people who are taking the activist path, because I believe there's many paths, that they can hear, and to help them sustain themselves, and also help them stay flexible and alive, so that they're like a leaf in the springtime of a tree, rather than the leaf in the fall, when it's kind of brittle from too much heat and drain. So have you or others done anything like that, or considered that to sustain the activist community, among others?
Well, activism is a lot of research and a lot of commitment, and a lot of people do get burnt out, but that's why you need to create a movement of like-minded people, and you have to have a group that can, constantly switch off and, intelligently work smarter instead of harder. But the fight more is in the government today. So we need people to go into the government so we can make changes from the inside out, because we're trying to make changes from the outside in, which is hard because, there's a lot of, resistance in that part. So we need to go into the internal and come work out. So that's where, we need to, encourage young people to do. Like Patty said earlier, young people are just sick and tired of being sick and tired. I think everybody is. And, we need to sober up.
Well, okay, just to clarify, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I'm just saying, it's been my experience, and maybe just mine alone, that people who go in, they see what's wrong, they know what's wrong, they see even more what's wrong, and then they begin to burn out. And so in order to sustain them while they're inside, so that they stay flexible, so that they, if I can probably misuse the term, so they can stay in that warrior space, rather than sort of a soldier fighting for a cause, but they stay in a warrior space that is flexible and alive and perceptive and self-aware. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it kind of, I don't really understand the question, but
That's
I
okay.
guess what I do understand is that, no matter what you do, you need to take a break because you will get burnt out. You will get burnt out, and because you feel alone, you get tired physically, mentally, everything happens spiritually. You start to get heavy, and then your health starts to
Yeah.
break down. So you need to do it intelligently, and you know have people around you, that like-minded people, like I said, and to have those kind of groups that are willing to support you, that are supporting the same cause. And believe me, there's more people than you think that are supporting you. A lot of people don't want to step up to the front because of their jobs or education or who they are, what they do, but they're there to support you. So you can use those support groups and continue on your work. But you do need to take time for yourself, and if you don't, you will burn out.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Dr. Patty?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd like to just add to that, Doug, because Doug was speaking about earlier about the spiritual warrior, and with our actors, our groups that go out and are doing fine work. I don't know, what if when they come back to rest, because they get tired because they're in that emotionalism, they're in that pain, eventually wears on them. And it's kind of a contagious one to the other. If they couldn't come back in some way to find their rootedness, their indigenous, through their values, through the love, through the intelligence, so that they're constantly being nurtured with those values that Doug spoke about. And I know in my philosophy, what I teach and stand for is that love intelligence. In fact, that's my name for God.
Yeah.
God has 101 names, but recently I've been, in my prayers, it came to me that God is harmonious love. And then sometimes I even sing to myself, if there was enough love, we could melt all the guns. So I agree that we need to work with systems, but we need to have a special system to work with systems so that we don't burn ourselves out or get buried because we stood up for our rights. You have to come back somehow and remember who we are.
Yeah.
Could I also say to Eugene, I'm sorry, I wanted to make sure that that Robert knew that you can find some recordings of Mr. Goodfeather on online. So if you Google the Goodfeather, and there are some recordings out there of him doing native prayers for the land, for environmental justice and some other things. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, what I was going to say, and that is in doing this work personally, in any of the work that I've been doing over the years, I find that a couple of things are very important, and self-care is at the top of that list. And becoming aware of when I think I'm doing the work, as Dr. Patty said, if I think that I'm doing it, then I'm going to get worn out, or whatever it is, right? But taking care of self, and having people around you to maybe pull your coat to, hey, maybe you should take a break for a day or two or three or whatever it is, but becoming mindful of taking care of self. One of the things I like to say is that you are the most important person in your life. Take care of you. Yeah, and doing this work. Leah, good to see you.
Thank you. I I loved hearing you talk, Mr. Goodfeather, and hearing about the inner warrior, and it takes a warrior to cry, reminded me of the old commercial about not polluting, with the Native American on the side of the road. You may be too young to remember this. I mean, but the Native American had a tear running down his face, and it was a great commercial, and it pulled everybody's heartstrings, and me as a kid, definitely. And it also reminded me that in all the documentaries I've been watching on anti-racism and trying to learn as much as I can, I see that Black men seem to have an easier time crying than white men. No? I see it a lot, and I think it's a good thing. It shows humanity, it shows compassion and self-awareness. I mean, I've seen Obama cry, and so I think it's good. And I wonder what's wrong with white men, that they're so stultified and disconnected from emotions that they can't cry. So
Leah, I want to jump in here real fast, right? Because generalizing like that may not be the best way to go, right? So I understand that it's been your experience, that's what you experienced, but I don't think it would be fair to generalize and clump everybody in to that. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, sure.
Okay.
I
Thanks.
do.
Okay, cool. Only because I have some very good white friends, and we and I am a crier, who I've shared tears with, and just from heart to heart stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
Maybe I've been hanging around with the wrong white guy.
That's not for me to say. But here's the question though, right, Leah? Is there a question around that? Do you have a question around that?
I do. My question was, what has white supremacy done to the white men in my life anyway? So thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Goodfeather, would you like to take a crack at that?
Yeah, I can say a few things about that. I see a lot of people commenting as well, and like I said, a lot of things are taken out from the natural ability of our given rights, and what is false pride, and one of those things hold us hostage from our tears, and when we're held by people that we love and trust, and so we want to make them feel good, and we want them to be proud of us, or and also we're taught embarrassment and shame and blame. So we don't want to do that in front of me, because right away so what happened, what's going on, what did you do, or this, or so it's a judgment issue as well, and those things are taken out of your life, crying, not dressing like a man, or all of that, or dressing like a woman, or getting married to a woman and a man. A lot of things have changed. We have evolved in different ways, and so those things from the past, those mistreatments, or those false teachings and our upbringing really holds us hostage. And a lot of people are still held hostage to that because they respect their elders. I mean, their mom and dad and their grandma and grandpa, but a lot of those teachings are very negative teachings, because they're taught to, so that we can oppress those feelings and those issues in our lives. And those feelings and issues actually are so intelligent, that they activate us to do something in life, to not just practice how to be depressed. We need to learn how to practice how to be healthy too. And that's part of it. And being healthy is, crying. There's nothing wrong with that. So I don't know if that answers your questions, but that's what I've learned.
Thank you so very much. Yes, yes. Adine, and then Tyrone, go ahead, and you know how this works.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to just piggyback on to what Leah said, and then what our speaker said. I think it's not so much white men against black men. I think it is those who feel they have the entitlement to dominate. And once you have the entitlement to dominate, you become devoid of compassion. And that has no race or no color. So I think we have to really be careful about the people, male or female, whom we worship, look up to, and make sure that they have pure hearts and pure spirits and are not building their egos on dominating us.
Thank you, Adine. We have Mr. Eddie Freed and then Tyrone Cozy.
Thank you. Adine's comment gives me pause to what I was going to comment, but let me proceed just to get the reaction of the group. When Leah talked about what has white supremacy done to white men, I think the white supremacist call is to take action and to move past the human experience, whether that be pain or whatever, sincerity, other deep feelings, and to move to action quickly. And in my own work, and maybe I'm one of those guys that's been in Leah's sphere who don't cry, I have found the need to make particular effort when there are sensitive moments, not to move to action, to stay in the experience, to feel, to learn, to truly try to absorb and appreciate the experience that's being brought to me, that I'm in the middle of with other or others, and gain greater understanding before there's any motion toward what do we do about this. And so I appreciate what Mr. Goodfeather said. I think that there's, we are taught embarrassment, we are taught shame, we are taught to hang tough. And all of that moves us away from an environment that brings us together. So I want to thank Mr. Goodfeather for that, and Leah for the question.
Thank you, Eddie. All righty. We have Tyrone and then Frank.
Good morning, everyone. My son got married this weekend, so really excited about that. Beautiful young lady.
Mazel.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Leah, I appreciate your comment, and also you, Cody. I appreciate both your comments. Leah, in terms of what you were saying, I think that, and I work with a men's group. Let me start with it. We call it Spiritual Man, and we meet once a month. And the purpose of that is because men in general, and there are black and white men on these calls, who have challenges, just showing emotion. And I think to your point, Eddie, showing emotion implies weakness. I think, Adine, your point you're making about the dominant point of view is true too. I think for black men, there is so much pain, collective pain, that is built up inside. It's almost hard to cry. It's like almost being numb. And in our culture, I grew up in Chicago. If you started crying, you're a punk. Really, really just simple, And that, unfortunately, that macho thing has gotten away of people being able to release. Because to your point, I think it was you, Marcy, who made the comment about tears are like, the showers of the soul. I think that's so true. For people to be able to express how they feel inside without feeling like, they're going to be weak or anything. You have to be in a very special, safe place in order for that to come forward. So I just want to make that comment. I think it's regardless of the race. I think just for men in general, there's a challenge. There's a challenge with that, and that leads to greater mental problems. I think mental health issues, because you don't get a chance to release what you're experiencing. Sometimes it comes out in rage. Maybe that's the only way, because we don't know how to deal with those emotions. But that rage could be the fear, and fear is the basis of everything, right? The fear of driving down the street and getting stopped, driving while black is a term we sometimes use, or a white skinhead who's like really feels threatened that the white race is going to be annihilated. I mean, look at it now. It's all, by 2050, there'll be far more majority. Californians are already majority of minorities, but that's going to be true in this country, and it's already true in the world. So I could see that point of view as well. But all that leads back to people trying to put up a front and show how badass they are. Well, the truth of the matter is that they little kids inside, not even in touch with their child inside. So I just wanted to add that comment. Thank you guys for letting me kind of run my mouth there.
Thanks, Tyrone. Lane?
One of the things that this is really, we want to make sure that we're staying on track. And I really appreciate this conversation, and for us to be aware that what we're talking about here is, in thinking Indigenous includes, right, our checking in and with our humanity, which includes being vulnerable and being, and grace, and thinking about how our actions affect other people, and thinking about how other people may be, what other people may be reacting to. So I'm loving this, this kind of side conversation about that same thing. Just, I don't know what Frank and Joe have to say, and by all means make your comments. I just wanted to say that I'm present to how much we are all talking about the same thing, and I want to make sure that Mr. Goodfeather and Dr. Luckenbach continue to talk about the native spirituality as a healing opportunity, and what that brings to us as we're navigating with each other this journey that can be very fraught with these with these little things that can pop up, and we go, oh, we have to talk about that, and which is all great. I'm so glad you guys are here and bringing these things. And thank you for speaking truth, right? To saying how you feel about what's happening in the conversation means a lot, because how often in conversations or in different spaces would this just get glossed over? So just, yeah, thank you for being who you are. Thanks, Eugene.
Thank you, Lane. We have Frank, and then we have Joe.
Mr. Goodfeather, I have a question for you. The indigenous traditions, let me step back on this a minute. In my mind, trauma is very rampant in our world. Every culture, every group, every individual person has gone through some level of trauma. How could we use indigenous techniques, indigenous traditions to bring about healing for the indigenous culture and every other group? Because every group has some level of trauma, be it because of their race, their color, their sexuality, their gender, you name it, every group has some level of trauma. So can you comment to that, please?
And what you're saying, I mean, especially what we just been through or what we're going through, and a lot of people have PTSD now because of what we've been through, and because of the trauma and the fear of what, the sickness COVID has gotten a hold of us. And but a lot of people have come through trauma in history, like boarding schools, and it, the majority was Native American and people of color, but also white people were indoctrinated to boarding schools too. And I researched that, and they were treated just as bad. And so, you know, the indoctrination of discovery began these kind of traumas. And it created trauma from, you know, getting your children ripped out of the mom's hands, or, you know, and then that trauma becomes embedded in the bloodline and becomes historical trauma. So it travels into history. It travels into history, whether whatever nationality you are, you have trauma traveling into history. And then you create your own, or something happens to you and you have trauma, and your own trauma added on to historical trauma from whatever it could be in your life, in your history. And so we carry these traumas, and what happens is, what I've realized and learned about these things that happen, these emotions that, you know, become hijacked from their natural state of what we're, you know, what it's supposed to do. And it becomes clustered because at the same time outside, you got a different kind of construct thinking, debilitating those natural abilities to heal. And so somebody will come, somebody that has the interest and, you know, to want to help the people have that intelligence because they've been through it. So one of the things that I've learned to come through my trauma, I had to face my trauma. I had to understand the trauma. I had to take the intelligence from that trauma and use it as a teacher instead of as a wound, as a debilitation, as an excuse to do drugs or be an alcoholic or be an abuser or whatever. I take those traumas and I use them for intelligence, because what I realized, everything is happening for a reason. Everything, no matter what we're doing. And as you can see, the status quo, as they say, is dying. So people are fighting for that status quo. And as you mentioned earlier, you know, and so these traumas are being used against you as well, and filled with different ideologies and different, you know, I guess thinking of how to be more dependent on the pharmaceuticals. And there's a reasons why we have and need these things, but to a point. And we have natural abilities to heal from these traumas and heal each other from traumas, but we continue to feed these traumas to each other, and we were just spoon feeding them constantly to each other. We're reminding each other, and we constantly practice it. We constantly practice depression. We constantly practice on these trauma issues. We constantly make excuses so we can use these excuses to do whatever we want. And as you see what's happening in the world, the violence from racism and all of that stuff, and they're using these against each other, and we're not healing from them. So these traumas really can grow into a very dysfunctional life and relationships with everything in your life. Everything. I mean, everything. From looking outside to driving down the road, your kids, whatever it is. If you continue to feed these traumas, you will live in a traumatic way of life. Even your thinking and believing, and you believe somebody that's going to feed your trauma in a negative way, and then you'll feed off that, and then you get more traumatic, I guess, more depressed. Does that make sense? Does it make sense to you or anything? Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense. The issue is if you thought you've dealt with some of the traumas and they keep coming up.
Say it again.
I mean, for me, I have faced many of my traumas, and I thought I've dealt with everything and I was fine, but every so often something will pop up that requires me to go look at it.
Triggers.
And that's when it becomes an issue. The holidays always bring it up for me, because holidays, growing up in an extremely dysfunctional family, holidays were when the arguments got worse, the fighting got worse, the physical abuse got worse. So I don't particularly care for the holidays. I hate them, actually, because it's just another reminder of the past that I dealt with, that I don't want to keep dealing with for the rest of my life. So it's, here I go again, going back into thinking that I have to go back and deal with it again, you know? And then I live with my husband who's, oh, let's decorate for Christmas. Like, I could care less about decorating for Christmas, okay?
Thanks, Frank.
He wants the up. I could do with a candle and be quite happy with a candle, okay?
Well, there you
Yeah.
go. One of the things about these holidays is because a lot of people die before the holidays, and we remember our loved ones, and so that brings a lot of sadness as well. And a lot of these holidays, some of these holidays were created on genocide, on racism, and all of that. But this is one thing that I've learned from these holidays, is they also give you an a feeling of love, of community, of fellowship, and in that way. That's the spiritual part of you. That's the spirituality part of you. Now, the memory of it and the cause of it, you don't use. You use the spiritual part. You use the love and the community. You use the fellowship. You use the love for your companion. You use the love of your animals and people. And you see people happy. And this is the time we become useful. We need to be useful at this time, because even though you're feeling upset or mad, you can put those aside and look at somebody who's less fortunate and help them, go out and help them and, bring fortune to them, help them stand up or get them a meal to eat. You're doing something, you're being useful, you're creating a change in the world from the beginning of you. So don't use these holidays as a debilitating your anger, and you're feeling your depression and your anxieties or whatever is triggering you like that. So when you see these things and you feel that trigger come to you, be aware of the trigger. And when you're aware of the trigger, you can do something about it. Instead of practicing, then you can get up. It's your emotions teaching you how to get up and move. You got to move. And when we just sit around and do nothing, that's when everything becomes stagnant and we become depressed and we just sit around and do nothing. But these are the emotions that we have to learn from, the intelligence from these emotions. And Patty can probably talk more about that, about these emotional intelligence. But that's what I've learned about, everybody's being angry about these things and that. But when you feel the love, that's the spiritual part of humanity. That's us feeling each other. That's us wanting to do something. That's the humanity. That's the spiritual that we come with. That's the connection that we have for each other as humans. And it's so amazing, because you can't help to, not wanting to help or do something, or, just sit down and have a meal with your loved one. Because I remember my daughter, she loved the holidays. She loved them. And I know I taught her the history, but she still loved them. And she loved that we sat around and ate together. She wanted to say, Dad, we're going to cook. We're going to do this. We'll eat this. I'm going to invite my friends. And that's the spirituality of it. That's what it was about. And my daughter passed away in 2014 with my grandson. They both made a journey home. So I missed those too. I missed those holidays, So in honor of her, I sit down and I cook a meal. And I said, we're still doing it. We're still doing it. And I can feel that spirit of her coming around and her seeing her brother and sister sitting around together. We're eating, we're having fellowship, we're sharing a meal, we're praying, we're happy, we're laughing. It's joyous. So we use that spirituality, we use that intelligence instead of using the depressional part of it. Take it around and be intelligent and learn how to use that spirituality in your life.
Yeah. And I know, Lane, you have something to say, but I also want to just real fast, we have to, remember that the word holiday is made up of the two words holy days, right? So Doug was saying, going back to the spirituality of it and looking at it, for me, coming to it from a point of, these are high holy days where I get to, be with friends and looking, because we have the choice. We always have the choice to go to whatever makes us feel bad, or recognize whatever the trigger is and then have the choice to go, you know what, I'm going here instead. Lane?
Yeah, thank you. And I know that Joe's got the question, which I think is probably going to be the last question.
No,
but
actually, he does not. We already talked.
Does not.
He does
all
not.
right. Well, then never mind. I just wanted to point out one of the things that while Mr. Goodfeather was talking, one of the reasons for us to be thinking Indigenous is to actually appreciate that community is so valuable, right? You're pointing us towards community, and that community is one of the things that we have lost in our evolution, if you will, right, in the wrong direction, right? And so that Indigenous practices, talking about even now restorative justice now is Indigenous in nature. So seeking out people to do our healing with us is absolutely Indigenous. I'm curious about whether Dr. Patty, I know that you are also an author. You have several books, and I want to point our audience to your books as well, because I believe that you do use Indigenous practices to navigate grief, which is part of what Frank is talking about for sure. And also, Mr. Goodfeather, does your book is your book a good resource for Frank? Yes, right? So, okay, great, beautiful. So I'm going to put those in the chat for folks to actually take a look. These make fabulous Christmas presents for people, just in case you're looking for a good stocking stuffer, folks. Okay, all right. I thank you. That's all that's all I had to say there.
Why don't you keep rolling and close us out?
Really? Well, I want to ask Dr. Luckenbach if she has any other words, because we
Yes.
haven't heard from you for a while, my dear.
I know. I've just been enjoying all the participants, and I support you all. I love this show. This is wonderful, these talks, and that let us all come together. And I say, let us all come together. I know we are led and guided through that love intelligence to find our way, and the spiritual light shines bright on all beings. And so that's my Christmas, Hanukkah wish for everyone. And I just thank you for this opportunity to be present and to be able to dance my prayers for all humanity. So thank you.
Thank you for being here. Mr. Goodfeather? Oh, you're muted. I'll give you 30 seconds.
Okay, our December 17th, we're going on live at My High Church, so tune in for that. Come to the program if you want. Go to lakotaway.org, support us in a good way. And I want to thank you all for this conversation, very intelligent. I love this. We need to keep doing this more often and as much as we can. So go out and make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. And can you give me the URL for My High Church, please? One of you?
The what?
Mile High Church? What's
Patty?
the URL? Yeah,
I think-
Patty, you want to just stick that in the chat for me? I'd love it.
Yeah. Let's see if I
Thank
can
you so
find
much.
the chat.
Guys, thank you so much to both of you for this wonderful, wonderful program, reminding us how important community is, how precious we are, and how useful it is to lean into that sacred nature of our relationship with Mother Earth and with each other. Please join us next week when our guest will be Mr. Kenneth Fischer of the Oakland-based organization, The Mosaic Project.
Yes, yes.
He'll be talking about the work they do to empower youth to be leaders, healers, and peacemakers. I also want to thank our donors. Thank you all who responded to our Giving Tuesday ask. Thank you, thank you. God bless you. Thanks for loving us. And as usual, we encourage you to continue to engage in conversations with folks who do not look like you, and to continue to seek out learning and growth opportunities, and to actively look for and engage in local and national organizing efforts. Eugene.
And just one quick reminder that this coming Saturday, we'll be hosting our one-day virtual workshop on Saturday, December 11th. It is called What's Ours to Do? We still have a couple of spots available, so you want to jump on there really fast. It's $50. The limit is 22 people. We have maybe 5 or 6 seats left. It's designed to provide you with tools that can help you have difficult conversations regarding race in your families and communities, and deepen your connection to humanity, and also to clarify your own personal call to action so you can do the work you feel called to do. You can register for the workshop at the website, which is www.racetalkrevolution.com/events. Again, what's ours to do is creating safe, equitable spaces to talk about race. Again, that's www.racetalkrevolution.com/events. Once again, I want to thank you, Dr. Patty. Good seeing you, my dear friend. And Goodfeather, thank you so much. And just don't be strangers. We will be asking you guys back, I am sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for
And
being here.
we're out. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the week.